Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karin Anderson-Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into the assassination in front of a crowd of young people, and I believe his wife and two little children of Charlie Kirk. This has been a very, very polarizing moment for our culture as Americans. Some people knew Charlie's work well. For just full disclosure, Dan and I had met Charlie in person at a fundraiser, not for Turning Point, but for Prager University, which is another platform that they had partnered with from time to time, I believe, or just shared common values of Judeo-Christian ethics. And we had met him personally. I mean, not extensively, just hi, appreciate your work. Thanks for all you do to help young people find their way in a time of confusion and frankly, a lot of evil. We also donated and still donate to Turning Point USA. So I took this horribly when I found out. Elia called me. I was at Costco. It's a week ago today. And he was like, Aunt Karin, have you heard? They shot Charlie Kirk. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? I was just in shock. Just getting back to your sons, when we went to rescue the Republic a year ago in September, we talked about it on the podcast. And it was a very beautiful event unifying people. Charlie and TPUSA would be considered very, very right, probably right wing nowadays. Who knows? I don't know if these terms mean anything anymore, but they would be considered very conservative. The people who started this Rescue the Republic are evolutionary biologists, two professors, former professors, but scientists. And they pulled in a lot of people who, like writers like Matt Taibbi, who would have been considered very left wing, but the Rescue the Republic was about free speech, stopping censorship, letting people speak. And the point I bring that up to is, again, trying to find that common ground again that was very, very normal back in the 70s and 80s when we were coming up and dad was voting Democrat and mom was voting Republican, but yet we could all have these common values. We've been so polarized now that an event like that was very unusual. I don't want to say unusual. It's to me, it provides hope that we can find the unity, which we're going to talk about later in this episode, because of how polarized we are when situations like this happen. Back to E&J, they were excited to come with us. We flew them out there with us because they wanted to see Charlie speak. He was on the docket. He didn't end up being able to make it at the last minute. My point is, for young men who have been told that every urge that they have, which I would argue is a God-given urge to drive, to be aggressive at times, yes, to assertive, be protective, sure. Yes, assertive at least, but aggressive in a good way. Get after it.
Standing up, convictions, challenge, right?
Charlie represented that. And for many young men who've been told those are toxic masculinity traits, you and I have touched on that, he was a really big idol, role model, I'll say, for many young men. And it may be that part of his movement did sway the election, which again gets so polarized again. I say all this, Elliott, because I know you are dealing with a lot of people coming to you overwhelmed, concerned, grieving. I was grieving hysterically. I was sobbing like I haven't cried since dad died. There's also so much weirdness around this, which I don't even want to get into right now. But there's been, I guess, I don't even go online because it's hideous out there, but I guess there's been people who are basically gleeful that a 31-year-old man, father and husband is removed from this earth and his kids will be orphans or just have a widow left. I mean, to me, that's kind of where I want to start, Elliott.
Yeah, Karin, for me, very difficult week for me as well, personally. And of course, as a spiritual father, as a pastor, as a representation of comfort and counsel, both in the Judson community, which has a super wide, diversified personalities, politics, doctrine, beliefs. That's part of what I love about Judson. It's pretty open. Evangelical Baptist roots, but very open. And so I've had fascinating conversations there. And then, of course, my network through counseling and churches has also, it's just been one of the most fascinating weeks of my counseling career. And that's pretty wild to say for a crisis therapist. Just the differences in response and grieving and movements. And then for me personally, Karin, Tuesday, last Tuesday, a day before Charlie was assassinated, one of our sweet old ladies in church passed away. And so that death was hard. I've known her for a long time, not just the 5 years she's coming to Solid Rock. I've known her 35, essentially. I've traveled with her and with their family. So that was a big hit. And she's very close to mom's age, and mom and her were friends. And so mom was sad, obviously. And then later that day on Tuesday, my mentor from the E-Free Church, Dr. Rick Thompson, passed away suddenly. He'd only got a diagnosis 2 weeks ago and died in 10 days. It was just like Professor Shea. Remember when Professor Shea got pancreatic cancer? They had just announced it. Like 6 days later, he's gone. So I didn't get to say goodbye to Ted. I didn't get to say bye to Dr. Rick. I had like 15 to 20 lunches with him throughout my pastoral career. He was Warren Wiersbe's son-in-law, by the way, and just had this great, he was just super helpful. He just understood me, my personality, and understood I was at a historical church and how to help build the energy in the movement. And so it was just like, those two things happen. And then I'm sitting at my desk and the notifications start flying. You know, my sons and Jacob came in to see me, and he was quite shocked and moving through it. And that just started like a 3, 4, 5 day process of nonstop texts and calls and requests and movements on campus and off campus. So I didn't really get any of the main grieving out till Sunday afternoon after service. I couldn't quite get myself to emotionally release that while I'm caring for other people at the same time, which is not a great way to do it. But I couldn't find any breathing room or gap to do it. And because of that, and because of my pastoral lens and my lens and spiritual lens as primary and priority, it helped me do some deep reflection and continued appreciation and admiration for Charlie. But it helped me do some deep reflection on not only our convictions and our stands for truth and justice and righteousness and holiness and calling out evil and all those kind of things, which we'll really branch into next episode, but also recognizing that this almost could be expected. When someone becomes this strong and this declarative of God's truth, and also calling out lies and deception and deceit, and he falls in line with, here's the stats. I went on Open Doors International, which is one of the leaders in the World Watch research for Christianity and churches. So these are not good stats. So letting people know this is going to hurt. So 2025, 380 million Christians are in high level persecution, meaning their very life is threatened every moment. 380 million. 4,476 Christians have been murdered this year. 7,679 churches have been attacked or burned down. 4,744 Christians have been imprisoned for their faith. So I'm not trying to diminish any of the severity of Charlie's passing, because you and I will talk about that in just a minute. Why did that have such a global response and a societal impact and a church impact? But this shouldn't be a surprise to us as much as we're devastated. And I was shocked too. Obviously, I did not anticipate it. It's not like I'm like, oh yeah, he'll be assassinated any day now. That's not the point I'm making at all. I've just been around the faith long enough and seen the reaction and the responses. And as I told my church Sunday morning in my opening comments and call to worship, which was very grieving oriented, every single disciple was executed. Almost every single prophet was executed. John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, was beheaded for a lap dance, right? The apostles after Jesus were all martyred for their faith. We go throughout history, a majority of the people who stood up similarly to Charlie or in a same vein as Charlie have been executed for their faith, assassinated. And that doesn't make it less painful. I'm not trying to say that at all. It's just wrapped into the global war of evil versus truth, Satan versus Jesus, spirit versus the minions, etc. I just want to give that large scope reference for us before we dive into some grieving understanding.
When you say that, it's true. I don't even know how we run around forgetting that a lot. Like that the Christian life should be the joyful life. And we've talked about this even very recently. We talked about suffering as inherent, and you put it, being a Christian entails trauma.
Yeah.
Because
to really
you
follow
are
Christ. Yes.
Yeah. Because if you're going to do it legit, you're going to be salt and light in a dark and heavy and a world that is Satan's domain. Mm-hmm. It's Satan's domain. God has allowed him to be the ruler right now. Even though God still intervenes, obviously, but
yes, and he still has authority over, but we have to stand up within the power of God to offset that dominion and rule that Satan's been given for this time period.
And in a way, though, when you say that, it's like we should just all just get ready, buckle up, as Charlie used to say at the end in the intro of his podcast. He'd say, "Buckle up, here we go." I think he said "buckle up," but he definitely said, "Here we go."
Yeah,
it's a little terrifying, though.
Mm-hmm. It is for sure,
like,
and we don't think about those world stats. And if you go on to the 10 countries with the most persecution and deaths, anyone who goes on that site for Open Doors International, I encourage you to, once in a while. If that's not your spirit, don't go on there every day and keep reading the stats because it'll depress you. But it's obvious, those 10 countries. But just as much stuff starting to happen in America that used to be only Middle East or North Korea, Somalia, Nigeria, places we might think of, oh yeah, that's a persecuted place. When it happens in our own soil, in our own free country, in our own evangelical nature, and sometimes our evangelical bubble, it causes such almost shock and panic, like shock and awe, almost like the reverse of what Bush was talking about when we bombed over there, that kind of shock. Oh, this is almost like, oh my gosh, this penetrated my bubble.
Yeah.
And so I've had many good friends, including one of my best friends, Kelly Peters, say, I will no longer be quiet, right? I will stand up. I'm going to start, in honor of Charlie and reflection of my faith and my convictions, I'm going to be even more dramatically, and he's already strong, but he's going to be even more dramatically strong with his voice and his platform, and he has one. And so I've seen so many of those responses. And for those who aren't there yet, who are just still grieving and struggling to sleep and struggling to feel hope, that's normal too, right? People will respond in different ways. And lots of my friends and clients who've called or asked for sessions have said things like, I can't stop crying. It's been a week, right? I don't want to go to work. I don't want to read. I don't barely want to eat, right? They're in a deep stage of the grieving process. And then that depressive stage can be a while. This was horrific. This was shocking. This was like it will burst your bubble. So I just want to remind our listeners, Karin and I teach this stuff. And so it's easy for us to remember it or to bring it forward, but it is important. And Kubler-Ross is the famous research woman who brought forward the 5 stages of grief. Now I like the expanded 7 stages. I'm just going to remind us what those are. And Karin, your response at Costco, my response sitting on my desk, working on my message at the time, that was weird for church, shock is the first stage. Just flat out shock. They always say in grieving research that a sudden surprising death is harder than a death that you kind of know is coming. The ones you know are coming, someone's got terminal cancer and those stink, but your time, your body, your mind has some time, some recognition to cognitively wrestle through it. An assassination like this out of the blue, most of us, even those who like him and admire him like me, I didn't know he was speaking at a particular place that day. I assume he's out speaking, but I didn't know there. Right. So shock is first, then often denial. Like, this can't be true. This has got to be a lie. Like, okay, he's going to get in the hospital. They're going to heal him. It's going to be fine. Right. Maybe he'll lose something, but he's going to be all right. Right. We almost start.
Well, yeah. And Elliott, in this day and age, people, it's just that one of these internet lies. Like they said Trump was dead a couple weekends ago and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And some people were gleeful about that too. So in this day and age, it was for a whole weekend. But in this day and age with AI too, maybe it's not true. And so we go into that denial.
Yeah. And that's stage 2 is the denial, right? Stage 3 is the anger. And that can last a long time. Denial doesn't tend to last that long because just the realities of life start to hit you so much from all your sensory angles. And eventually you're like, oh, I guess he's gone.
Yeah.
Right. Anger can hit. And if we're not careful, we can stay there. And if we stay in the anger piece, even though we all have a righteous indignation here, which is a completely spiritually, scripturally good. It is how we should feel. We should not as Christians go, okay, well, he got murdered for his faith, but he was a good dude. He lived well. No, this should not be our response. We should not be placid about it, right? So there is a righteous anger that needs to be there, and that helps us move through. But at the same time, with all my trauma research and all my healing research and active work with clients, if we don't forgive and if we don't release, our right to then take that anger and be just as violent and hostile to the enemies as the enemy was to our leader, then we are no better. And what did Jesus say on the cross? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Right. And so it's so hard to comprehend. And even when Jesus' cousin, right, his dude, John the Baptist, was beheaded, and they tell Jesus about it, he never said anything about, let's take the Romans down. Right. Not once in the Gospels did Jesus say anything negative about the Romans. Neither did Paul, neither did Peter. That's astronomically hard for me to understand and comprehend. When did Jesus get the most angry? At the church, at the synagogue, at the temple, at the spiritual leaders. And so I'm not saying Jesus didn't have anger. I'm sure he was devastated and grieving for his cousin. But he channeled it in the right direction and like, okay, I'm just going to carry the torch that, John the Baptist handed off to me anyway. And I'm going to carry that torch even stronger in light of my cousin. And that's such a hard place to be. So with one of the clients I was working with yesterday, he had to acknowledge that not only had he not forgiven in a general way yet, he was embittered and kind of leaning into his anger. And he's got some anger struggles anyway. It's part of the reason he's seeing me regularly. And then that just fed this willingness then to go out of his self-control, go out of his disciplines, go out of his appropriate measures and communication with other friends and other family. And and he thankfully kind of regrouped, went through some forgiveness last night, still mad, still grieving, but felt some movement towards the next step. The next step in the grieving, Karin, is bargaining. And bargaining, I don't like that term. I wish they come up with a different one. Have you heard of a different one besides that one? I don't like that term.
Why don't you like it? I mean, it's just basically trying to be like, hey, God, if I do this, then this will happen. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're just trying to make a deal.
Essentially, you're trying to frame it differently, right? It's cognitive behavioral kind of stuff. You're trying to reframe it in a different way and build some positivity out of it and things like that.
I think because Kubler-Ross initially was using these stages of grief for terminal illness. So at that point, you're in the bargaining stage. You're like, hey, God, will you cure me from this cancer if I agreed to donate all my money to such and such charity? That's, I think, where it comes from. It doesn't always track with something once someone's passed away.
Good point. Yeah, very good point.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I would like something like navigating your soul. That's what I would like. I would like something like that, just to wrestle through the truth that you can be extremely upset and frustrated and hurt, and also be peaceful, joyful, and content in the Lord at the same time. And again, she didn't write these in a spiritual manner either. So I don't know her faith. I'm not trying to say she didn't have any faith, but
I guess the way I would look at it with a death, so this stage to me, and I don't know, I'm putting words in Kubler-Ross's mouth, but this stage, if the person has already passed, you're not going to say something like, well, I'm going to bargain with God and he'll come back to life. There was a moment where I was like, God, why don't you just go ahead and do a Lazarus on this?
That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
I know, just show everybody, God. But I think maybe you'd say something like, you try to work it out, like you said, a reframe, like, well, there's going to be people coming to Jesus because they're going to be like, who's this Charlie Kirk guy? And what the heck happened that they had to silence him? Yeah. What was so threatening about what he was saying, that to threaten the establishment or threaten, again, the prince of darkness in this world? So then maybe you make it make sense somehow, because
that's a better way of saying it.
I guess that's what, I don't even know if we have a term for that, but that's where I would go.
Publish your own stages. I like your language better.
What? No, I'm not going to mess it. That ground's been covered.
Get your research done and get those stages published. The next stage is the depression. And that can last a long time. Like we said earlier, that can be a new soberness that is with you for a while. And sometimes that soberness is encouraging because it wakes us up a little bit. Right. And I think that was one of Charlie's greatest gifts. He was just such a clear, concise communicator that even if you disagreed, it would kind of force you to go, what do you, and then just make you kind of deal with it, right? Just very, very Pauline in his ability to challenge and articulate sometimes deep, complicated theological issues or political issues in pretty clear, concise, and ways that made you have to take a stand, made you have to think, and hopefully respond. And so this depression piece, which can last a while, can be a layer underneath us that leads to the last two stages, which are the hopeful ones. Acceptance and some reality. We have to accept Charlie's gone. That's just the reality. But then the activism, the hope, the inspiration. Like I will be motivated, like my friend Kelly's doing. I'll be motivated by this death that makes me really mad and I'm really sad, but I'm going to be motivated to stand up stronger, to be more like him or more like her or more like those 4,000 missionaries that have been killed. And no one knows about it, probably in way worse ways than Charlie was, honestly, ways we wouldn't want to see. And please don't go watch that video over and over and over again. That is terrible for your brain and your mind to hold on to. But that acceptance piece should lead to, especially for believers in Christ, what it did for Peter and the 11 disciples who became apostles, and then with Paul and Silas and Barnabas and the others who joined, it changed their entire life. They were so motivated by Christ's death and his resurrection that they started the church. And the gates of hell will not win this, guys. And they will not win. Jesus promises we win, but it doesn't mean the battles aren't terrible. It doesn't mean there won't be other great leaders that are executed for the name of Christ, for the name of their conservative positions, whatever that might be. It doesn't mean this is the last one, but hopefully that inspiration piece can move us forward.
And we should also mention that Kubler-Ross talked about moving through these stages, but there's the research shows, and she and her theory evolved to, or maybe it never was meant to suggest that you would always go step by step through these stages. Yeah. And once you left one, you would never revisit it. Grief is cyclical is what I want to say. So you may still be making progress. Like say you're down here and you're kind of coming out of your grief and you're hitting all these stages. Think of all the stages here. And now you're hitting them all over here. I'm sorry, my visual for anyone listening on the podcast. But basically you can hit them and you can still be moving through them and making progress as you continue to grieve. And you might revisit one and go, man, I'm back to the angry phase again. I thought I was through that. So you want to give yourself a lot of grace and permission to resonate with the stage and then bounce back to it. And it doesn't mean you're not making progress. It just means that it's hitting you again.
And for a lot of us who deal regularly with comprehensive grief, like I mentioned, I lost 2 other dear friends who I knew well. And then Charlie, who I did not know well, but I admired, appreciated, and listened to a ton of his stuff. I actually like listening to his preaching almost more than I like listening to his conservative politics, just because my saturation in the word of the Lord is greater than my political knowledge. But I appreciate both sides. But I loved his preaching. I loved it. Very direct, very specific, very challenge oriented, very manly. And I'd say that in all the right ways. But if you've gone through, like for your husband, gone through the loss of his father recently, now Charlie gets assassinated like that. It's called that comprehensive or complex grieving, where elements of his sadness for his dad are going to sink into this new sadness for Charlie, and will grieve deeper and longer and harder. And it's not like Dan wasn't consciously aware of being sad about his father. It's just that the unconscious say, this is another thing that makes us really sad. And then it comes out even deeper and harder and stronger. So those of us who are going through other losses at the same time, then have this sudden, shocking, cruel, vicious, wicked assassination, it can really send you deep into those stages that could last for quite a while. I mean, for our listeners just to know, elements of this, it would be completely appropriate. It's not a sign of your immaturity in your faith or your immaturity in your emotions or your weakness or something. It could last easily throughout the holidays. And I don't want our listeners to be unaware and feel like if they're still grieving a little bit by Thanksgiving or Christmas season and something's lost a little bit of the shine and the glory and the joy, to not be over-alarmed that they're needing to go get an SSRI or something. No, this is deep humanity grieving. And we've seen that grieving
SSRI, just
all over the world.
Full disclosure ever. Public service announcement, never get an SSRI. Go listen to Dave Wayne and me talking about it. It's just an antidepressant. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Elliott.
It's your point. I mean, it was just your point that I think you had brought up, and now I'm fleshing it out in a broader context.
Do they call it compound grief? It reminds me of compound interest. Like you start getting interest on your interest. A compound grief sounds like what they should call it if they don't.
And you do a great job championing our humanity. We are humans. We're going to have deep, difficult, strong, powerful emotions. And when something this dramatic, this shocking, this terrible happens, especially our deep feelers out there, which you and I are in that camp, it could last for quite a long time and catch us in different times, and not to think, oh gosh, we got a problem, we got an issue. No, we're deep feelers. We have a passion for the Lord. passion for conservatism and theology and doctrine. And this felt like it blew it up for a minute.
Well, and I think it surprised a lot of people how profoundly they were impacted. Like you said, many people enjoyed watching his clips that TPUSA would put on when he would go to campus and speak boldly and debate young people. And he did debate people who disagreed with him. Always, he knew he was going into enemy territory, so to speak. And he's been very polarized because I think people who want to see him, they've called him a racist, or because he's not for, he believes men are men and women are women. And so the trans community, then he's transphobic or whatever. So people take clips, they take them out of context, they post them just to fuel the flame of their fire over here. And because of that, I think the people who knew more would listen to a full sermon, for example, listen to a full speech. I went to TPUSA's, their Young Women's Leadership Conference a couple of years ago, wondering, wow, I'm not a young woman, but is there a place for me to help mentor some of these young ladies? And I wanted to just know more about the movement. So I heard him speak in person. You see a different than a soundbite on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so that's been hard too. I think people it's been very divisive among friends, which I really want us to get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But I think also it has caused a lot of fear. Like, so for someone like me, I'm like, now who's going to be the leader for those young men? Now they're set off in the wilderness again without that strong leader for them. And because I love some young men very much because they're my nephews, I worry, like, who's going to rise up and take that spot? Elliott, can I read you just a short little tweet that someone sent me that kind of also speaks to why that grief? So I guess what I was trying to say, the grief for me is that now I'm worried about, I have a fear now, who's going to rise up and be
what do we say about that? What do we say about our worries and fears? We cast them on the Lord, for he cares for us, right? We assume God's got this. We acknowledge our fear. We acknowledge our worry, but we flip it quickly and say, God, you got it. You're going to rise up 10 new guys at the same level as Charlie, thanks to Charlie, right? That's how we frame it. Now read it because it's a great tweet.
Yeah. And maybe people have already seen it. I hope they've seen it because it was very comforting for me. But again, yes, that's where we have to go. But I just wanted to acknowledge that compounded with the regular grief or whatever grief, like people in your congregation or your father's passing in case of my husband. And then thinking about, so there's so many layers to it that I think sometimes that takes us by surprise. But this guy, I don't even know this guy, Chad Prather, but he's obviously got some words of wisdom here. He says, good morning. The reason you feel Charlie's death so deeply is because grief doesn't measure itself by proximity. It measures itself by meaning. You didn't have to know him personally to feel the sting of his absence, because when a voice like his goes silent, something in the atmosphere shifts. The reason it feels heavier than so many other tragedies is because your spirit recognizes that this is not just about a man. It is about a battle. Scripture says eternity is written on our hearts. And when someone who carried truth with boldness is suddenly gone, eternity aches within us. It's like our souls know instinctively that the darkness celebrated, and that strikes us at the core. The reason you can't shake it is because psychologically, we don't only attach ourselves to people, we attach ourselves to symbols. Charlie became a symbol of conviction in a time of compromise, courage in a time of fear. And when a symbol is struck down, it rattles us, something primal and eternal inside us. 2 more paragraphs. That's why even those who never met him feel it. There is a strange thread pulling at us, and it is not imagined. It is real. We are bound together by shared purpose, by shared longing for truth, by the Spirit of God himself weaving us into a fabric that cannot be torn apart. This loss pulled at that fabric, and every one of us felt the tug. So if you've wondered why this hits so hard, it's because your soul knows. This is bigger than news. This is bigger than politics. This is about eternity, about truth, and about the weight of a man whose life carried both. Love y'all.
Just excellent. Great writing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, just very well done.
I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that level of dramatic loss and sudden shocking loss can last quite a while. And so not to worry about ourselves if we're grieving deeply and longly, but also not seep into those fears and seep into, it'll never be the same. Nothing will happen. And we've already seen that's not true. It's already been pretty powerful movements all over in regards to this.
Love and Life with Dr. Karin and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer Dr. Karin Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.